What's up, everybody? Peter Exodus O'Coffer here, doing another episode of All Things Music, and this is um, today's topic is to take the throne. How Queen overtook the Beatles. I did a couple weeks ago, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, did a take the throne, and I thought I covered everybody, and then I was going over that episode, and I'm like, I didn't cover how Queen took over, overtook the Beatles and took their throne because, white boomers, I hate to break it to you, but, Queen is getting more streams now than the Beatles. So they are the kings of classic rock now. And don't see that being reversed. I mean, parents teach their kids. Sometimes the kids reject their parents' music, but I don't think the grandparents are gonna, win this argument, with younger kids and their parents. So, yeah, so that's the state of it. In many ways, in my opinion, Queen was the classic rock group. They were the Beatles of the '70s. The Beatles were very innovative and pushed the envelope. They invented the album. In my opinion, and in many people's opinion, they weren't just, songs thrown together, from Help On. And, but, the Queen, with their lush, grand sounds, Bohemian Rhapsody and that kind of stuff, just pushed the envelope. And they, that bringing that the dramatic and the flair, that opera, the rock operas they would do. Something, Styx sort of did that, here in the U.S., but not to the extent of Queen. And so the Queen really did a lot of pretty interesting and pushed the envelope. But the reason why I think they overtook the Beatles, honestly, is late in the '70s they started dabbling in funk, and the album The Game. You have Dragon Attack, and then of course another one, Bites the Dust, and which that bass line is very similar to Good Times by Chic, and I think Chic probably has a writing credit, from that. So yeah, I mean, here we are sitting in the age of hip hop, and uh, the foundation of hip hop is funk. So and Queen dabbled in that, and it's interesting. It's just going through social media today and saw the one kiss on that Gene Simmons hates. It was I Was Made for Loving You, which, is a disco song, but it's also in the top five as far as streams for Kiss goes. And so, I know a lot of the boomer Rolling Stones fans hate Miss You, but these songs are rooted in, music forms from people of color are doing very well in this streaming era because, I mean, these genres from people of color have risen, even though classic rock was rooted in the blues. You know, hip hop is a black genre that is largely controlled by black artists for the most part with their own labels. Now, Universal and Warner are doing the distribution, but they're not deciding what's going on in a lot of these albums. So yeah, so I think that, and then the other big thing was the movie Bohemian Rhapsody and the fact that the struggles that Freddie Mercury had as a gay man, and was the millennials who by and large pushed gay marriage over the goal line and fought for that. So I mean, Freddie Mercury is a hero in that aspect, but Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the better biopics out there on musicians. I mean, it's very well done. The actor who played Freddie Mercury did a fabulous job. It was well written. They just did a really good job of looking at Queen, and you know that the Wembley Stadium concert that's so memorable, and they really focused on that. So and you know Freddie's passing from AIDS as well. The other reason why I don't think the Beatles are going to catch Queen is Adam Lambert. He's now 42. I mean, what happened with that was genius. I mean, if I remember, Lambert was on one of these reality contest shows as a singer, and Queen came in and they, for that episode, they recorded or performed, they would do guest artists, and Queen was that one, and so, it just worked between Adam Lambert and the active members of Queen. So he's 42 now. He has another 20, 25 years, even when, the current Queen members retire or pass on, he can still go on the road and take Queen, and do Queen songs. And so there's a lot more left in there. The last episode I just did an episode a couple of days ago on monetizing music catalogs, and the fact that Ringo and Paul and George, until they passed, were against anybody doing a movie or a mini series on the history of the Beatles. Well, BBC's working on that. Yeah, so that one of the interesting things of both Queen and the Beatles is, honestly, they didn't do a lot of branding. I mean, they let the music was so good that they didn't have to. They just let the music speak for itself. Now, it'll be interesting as we go forward, and unfortunately, I mean, the members of Queen and Paul and Ringo are going to pass away at some point, but it'll be interesting to see, the branding afterwards, and particularly for Queen, since they're, looks like they're going to set the record and sort of break the bank a little bit on the pending sale of their catalog. So yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly didn't see Queen, running down the Beatles 10 or 15 years ago and passing them up and becoming the most streamed classic rock band of all time. But hey, it happened. And honestly, if you would ask me in 1980 to list the top classic rock acts of the 70s, I mean, Queen's on the list of top 10, but it's kind of towards, I mean, let's be real. I mean, Led Zeppelin and The Who sold a lot, the Queen sold well, but Led Zeppelin, and The Who and Aerosmith probably outsold them. Kiss probably, even in that last, 76 to 79, probably outsold Queen. The Eagles certainly outsold the Queen. Yeah, but here we are, Queen's the king. They, of all the groups I named, I do think Queen was the most, adventurous when it comes to their music and trying new things, mainly, bringing in other genres and working with that. The other thing, the song that helps with Queen too is, they did in the early 80s was David Bowie, because David Bowie, by the time he collabed with Queen for Under Pressure, he was in his Blue-Eyed Soul phase by then. I mean, it slowly started with Fame, and of course by the time, Last Dance and China Girl, that album he did with Nile Rodgers, which blew up, went, diamond, over 10 million copies sold. But yeah, so that, certainly working with David Bowie didn't hurt. Interestingly enough, a couple months ago, I ran across an article online that argued that the Beatles' Revolver album was their Motown tribute album, which I love Revolver. I mean, it's a certainly in the top three as far as Beatles albums go. I would say that, and Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper are their, they're three best. You can go fight, and in my opinion, all three of those at worst are in the top 50 albums of all time and probably top 25. And I think all three of them did end up in the top 25 for the Rolling Stone top 500 albums of all time. So I love Revolver. It's a great album. It's nothing like Motown. There's no, I mean, for whatever reason, the Beatles were doing their thing and being very creative and pushing the envelope in the 60s, but they were very self-contained and they weren't drawn from, the current stuff going on other than psychedelia. So they weren't incorporating much that was going on in Motown or Stax. And, yeah, I mean, they were influenced by the blues. When they took their first of two excursions to Hamburg, Germany, they opened up for Little Richard, and Little Richard mentored them. So, yes, there was black influence there, but for whatever reason, and then, of course, I mean, late, Billy Preston, befriends him and really comes in those last few albums and really adds, some nice additions to, the Beatles' music in their catalog, but also kind of calms the stormy waters of all the turmoil in the Fab Four's relationship. It's unfortunate. Now, one of the interesting things, I was watching the Get Back, the Peter Jackson, the expanded version of that. I think originally it was just a 2-hour documentary. And, early on with the song Get Back, it was very progressive, and it was a song about racism, and it changed. So I'm curious if they ever put down some of those, the more the politicized version of Get Back on 8-track, because that's what they were working on at that time, and if Paul would release that. But that would certainly, but Blackbird is, does have, is about racism as well, as we find out in Beyonce covered Blackbird on her latest album. No shame, and for the Beatles and Queen, overtaking them, two great bands, both obviously in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they both did similar things in different eras. And so, but it is interesting. Again, I didn't see Queen passing up, and it was, it was millennials and Gen Z that kind of latched on to Queen and elevated them and made them the kings of classic rock streaming. So yeah, I mean, no disrespect to the Beatles, and I mean, Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger are the two elder statesmen of the music world now, with Chuck Berry passing on and Little Richard in the last 5 years, and Paul McCartney's been such a what's the word I want to say when it comes to these younger, mentoring and supportive of these younger artists. I mean, he sat down and recorded with Ye, and then just saw last week or the week before he was out there in the audience dancing at the Taylor Swift concert. So he's a great ambassador of music for these younger folks coming up, and I think it's great that Paul's so supportive. And the Beatles are still legends. I know it doesn't sit well with some white boomers that Queen has passed up the Beatles, but it doesn't tarnish at all their great legacy. And again, they're both great bands. So yeah, had to kind of cover this, and it was it's been an interesting ride for Queen. And I mean, the Beatles they're not going anywhere. People are still be listening to Beatles and Queen 100 years from now because the music's that damn good. But it will be interesting to see, how both of them, 25 years from now have been branded. So, yeah, so thanks for coming through. Let me work on this close. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Please leave some comments, good or bad. I don't, I'm just reporting the facts here, Queen is, yeah, the Beatles outsold Queen, but going forward, I mean, Queen has a huge lead. They have a couple songs now with over 2 billion streams. So they have a huge lead when it comes to streaming. And I don't see the Beatles catching them. It is what it is. But leave your comments anyway. Yeah, so I got 5 albums. They're, attached here to my YouTube channel, and they're on all the streaming services. I perform under the name Exodus, Xodus, and I also have 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. So thank you again, and I will see you next episode.